Hi, Jegaysus.
Hello, heathens.
Hi, friends.
Welcome to the inaugural episode of the Unholy Trinity. Nice to see everyone here. I'm glad we finally made
We
it.
did it.
Yeah,
Yay.
it only took like 6 months, but we're here. We're doing it. We're live.
So let's start with some introductions. Who wants to go first? I'm Jegaysus.
Hi, Jegaysus.
I'm mother of dogs.
Hi, mother of dogs. I'm Red Sage. You can call me Andrew.
You can call me whatever you want, really.
You can only call me your Lord and Savior.
That's exactly right. Mother of dogs, I've read your comment section. People are not allowed to call you whatever they want.
That's true. That's true. You can't call me whatever you want because I will come for your neck. But you can call me a wide variety of things. So I guess most people are probably here from TikTok. I'm going to assume.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not, then you can look us up. By all of these wonderful usernames. But yeah, let's get started, shall we?
Let's do it.
Sure. Do we want to start talking about maybe why we decided to do a podcast? What brought us here?
Ooh, that's a good idea.
Yeah. Who wants to start?
Well, you're in the
I
middle
will.
of my screen, so I feel like you should start.
I'm at the top of my screen, so I guess that's fine.
Well.
So I unexpectedly gained a bit of a following on the old TikTok. And I found that a lot of the things that I talked about in short form, people really wanted to hear more in depth. They wanted a deeper dive. And unfortunately, TikTok doesn't really allow for much deeper of a dive than 3 minutes. So I've been meaning to do this for quite some time, but I had absolutely no desire to stare at my own face for an hour. So I was looking for people who had a diverse set of opinions, but also who I genuinely liked and wanted to talk with for a couple hours a week. And so here we have Andrew, a progressive Christian, Jegaysus, my gay savior, and yeah, here we are. Unfortunately, they're both men, but what can you do? We'll go
I mean,
from
you do
there.
with what you can, I suppose. You'll get better options eventually.
No. And that's that, yeah. So I was hoping just to do this show to help folks learn more, maybe be entertained, and get to know me a little bit better outside of the old clock app.
I have pretty much the same kind of origin story. People asking, like, when are you going to do something longer than a minute? And then they introduce 3-minute videos that I still don't use. And I say never. People wanting the podcast. And I'm like, I can't entertain myself. I can talk to myself live for an hour on TikTok. But that's probably because there's live feedback and you can see comments and etc. So I wasn't running to go out of my way to just record myself. So it's nice to know that we have a group to be able to work together, banter off, and try to just kind of continue the conversations we've started on TikTok, and having a space to do that. It's going to be cool. Whatever that may look like, who knows? We might end up just doing movie reviews here in 2 weeks.
Oh, that'd be great.
God's Not Dead movie review.
I mean,
Yeah.
I haven't watched it for a good reason.
God, no.
But I really want
Yeah,
to.
I
Really do.
No. I feel like I need to watch it on mute. Like, I'll watch it with just the captions,
There you go.
and I'll be somehow less angry.
Yeah.
I feel the same way about horror films because I'm way too jumpy. I'm way too
Aw.
jumpy in horror movies, and so
Yeah.
it's just like if I can just
Me too.
not hear the orchestra build up to to the first cute white lady dying, I'll be fine,
Oh, yeah.
and it'll be great.
Yeah. And that's on musical manipulation. Yes.
Musical manipulation. We could make that one of our topics.
There you go.
Shameless plug. Love that. Okay, so the reason I'm doing this is for similar reasons that I do TikTok. I love talking about things that for some reason we've dubbed controversial, but I think are very important to our education as people, that are part of our story, our origin as people about, spirituality and religion. I, like both of you, was asked, hey, when are you going to do a longer format to dive in depth to some of the things you're talking about on TikTok, specifically in the realm of, like, religious literacy. which I think is the reason that we're kind of coming together. Like, if I were to look at a crossover of the three of us, the thing that we do, all of us, is religious literacy. We talk about the notion of like the Abrahamic religions and the impact of those on our life and our world and our trauma and our family of origin stuff, and that's what I think. So yeah, I guess that kicks off our episode for today. Is what is religious literacy? As I stand, religious literacy is understanding the ripple that a religion has on your world. And for Christianity in the United States, the ripple is unending. I mean, it's everything from the impact on the founding fathers, whether they are agreeing with or pushing against some ideas that come from, the British and French monarchies at the time, whether it's the way we think about faith in secular environments like schools, how churches have influenced politics, how empire and religion works together. I mean, all the way down to the imagery in the songs by Panic at the Disco. Like, church, religion, and language affiliated. I mean, there's a reason that Amen exists in songs by Panic at the Disco, is because we're all familiar with what that word means on some cultural level. There's a reason that Madonna is Madonna by name. There's a reason that Lady Gaga used the images that she did, is because on some level religion has impacted every area of our culture, and a lot of us are completely unaware of the thing that has such a strong hold on every aspect of our lives.
Absolutely. And it's important just because that thing can be weaponized, and if you don't understand it, you have no defense system against it.
I fully agree. Like,
well, and because it's weaponized.
No,
sorry,
please.
Go ahead. No, I was just gonna say, because it's weaponized, of course, it has a lot of negative impact. It causes a lot of harm, and a lot of that harm actually isn't biblical. I mean, there's a lot of kind of morally questionable or just downright bad things that the Bible has in it. But a lot of the things that are currently used to control the masses, for lack of a better term, by evangelical Christians and other sects of Christianity actually aren't even how the original texts read or were intended or understood. It's just how it's been translated and then used to harm people. So, like, having a better understanding of what the Bible actually says, what time it was created in, who it was written to, all of those things also helps to heal a lot of the pain, I guess, for lack of a better term, that's been inflicted on a lot of groups today.
Yeah, I remember earlier we were talking off camera about that, and you mentioned how understanding the Bible has helped you kind of heal in some ways and has helped others. Could you speak to that a little bit more?
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up in evangelical Christianity. It was non-denominational technically, but for anybody listening that's familiar with like charismatic Pentecostal Christianity, it was very much in that vein. And they love to talk about hell. And it's kind of like Jesus loves you so much that he wants to give you all of these like spiritual gifts and love and da da da. But if you don't believe in him, he will torture you forever. So enjoy. And that always sat really weird with me. It just didn't make sense. Like, even thinking about harming someone I loved, even if they didn't like me or didn't want to talk to me. If I loved them, I mean, at worst, all I would really want to do is just, I guess, leave them alone. So it was weird, but it also created a lot of stress around, like, am I really saved? How do I know if I'm saved? What if I don't have enough faith? I keep trying to have faith, but I don't have faith. But the driver behind all of that for me didn't feel like love. It felt like a fear of what was going to happen to me when I died. And I think that's not because I just made it up in my head. It's because that's what was pushed
Sure.
and talked about so frequently. So when I started researching on my own and reading about, like, okay, what does the Bible actually say about what we've translated as hell? It blew my mind. And we can dive deeper into it at another point, but if you've watched any of my TikTok videos, you know that a lot of the wording in both the Old and the New Testament have been translated to hell, which we have come to understand as eternal conscious torment. But at that time, there was absolutely no concept of that. And a lot of the wording around it was either just like the grave, where you're dead, or like, in the New Testament, there's Gehenna, which was the southeastern valley of Jerusalem. So learning those things and learning that this concept that had been used and misused and misapplied and abused to control people or to honestly scare people into doing what the church thought they should,
Yeah.
didn't mean what they said it meant. And for me personally, it didn't lead me back to religion, but I think that even if you decide to move forward with a progressive form of Christianity, or any real sect of Christianity, I guess, understanding that, I think allows you to even have a better, more loving, more peaceful spiritual practice.
It's freeing.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Like I was like, oh
Yeah.
my God, like this isn't even what the Bible teaches. Like if I decided at any point to like revisit religion, I could do it so much more freely and with so much more peace in my heart. So yeah, so that's sort of what I was talking about earlier, and I think Andrew, you had mentioned something about, was it reframing the narrative? I'd
Right.
love to hear more about
Yeah.
that, or rewriting your own.
So one of the things that you do in trauma-informed care around counseling, around dealing with your realizing that your story involves a certain kind of injustice upon your life, someone harming you, someone hurting you, rehearsing your narrative, telling your story over and over again to different people, eventually gets your body used to that reality. It does two things at the same time. Well, it does a lot of things, but it does two big things. One, it says to your body, this is real. I didn't make it up. I'm not a fool. I'm not an idiot. These things did in fact happen to me, and they happened in my own body. It's not a movie that I watched outside of myself. It happened in my own body. But it also, in some way, appropriately desensitizes you to the things that happened to you and allows you to process them and realize that's who I was and that's what happened to me then. It is not who I am now. Like for me, dealing with the trauma of my life, some of it religion oriented, definitely, a lot of it, and being able to say that to people over and over again has made me go, that's real, it's happened in my body, it happened over time, and now
Yeah.
I am a different person because of the choices I've made for the better after that happened. And I think it's what you do. I mean, whether you like it or not, you both of you create a very therapeutic space for people to either experience life in a cathartic way because of the way that you carry it. Like, Jegaysus is a walking catharsis. Like, just to embody, like avant-garde sacrilege behavior,
Right.
queerness with Christianity, and just, like, deal with it. It's here. It's real. Like, it's everything.
That's how I've always lived my life. I think it has to like have stems in when I was just like a child, realizing I was a walking contradiction, is what I always like to say. I'm black and I'm white. I'm German and I'm Jewish. At the time, I was gay and a Republican.
Oh, I didn't even know all that.
Oh yeah, so I'm just like I'm always at war with myself, is what I say. So I like to personify that.
Can we backtrack and you just say all of those little tidbits of your essence
Yeah.
again? Because holy shit.
So I'm black and I'm white. I'm German and I'm Jewish. And I was gay and Republican. At the time we were fighting for, marriage rights still. So it was that was how I always identified myself when I introduced people to me. Especially as a kid. I was like, hi, I'm a walking contradiction.
With the hair flip.
Yeah.
And you thought you were like the coolest.
I would have wanted to be your best friend, and we would have it would have been amazing. Like,
We can go back in time and do that, because honestly, I would need that as a child.
Yeah, I still
my
wanna be your
child
best
self
friend, my
needed
guy,
someone
so.
that was nice to me too. I'm with you.
Oh.
At one point, just to put a pin in that, can we please talk about, like, dealing with your own cognitive dissonance in politics, because like I had to deal with that coming from a conservative world, and it sounds like you had to
I think mine was a little different because I was still like 15 or 16 whenever I started paying attention to politics, and most of my politics were inherited. I don't think it was as much of a cognitive dissonance because they weren't mine. I was an adult. I was just kind of responding to the world around me, which at the time was the evangelical church telling me Republican, Republican, Republican. So I didn't really adopt the beliefs or support as much.
I think it would be a really interesting topic at some point to discuss this weird marriage of the Republican Party and the evangelical church, because at their base, I won't even say at their base, at the Bible's base, at least the New Testament, at least Jesus' teachings, are really at odds with most of the Republican Party's values. And I've said this before and I'll say it again, and people are going to get mad, but whatever. Christians today, at least evangelical Christians today, worship something closer to the Antichrist than they do the actual Christ. Because all of the things that Jesus taught about, for instance, like not praying in public, pray in your closet, don't do it for, I guess in today's terms, like, views, comments, whatever, clout. It's what's going on today. I mean, we have people arguing still to have prayer in school,
right?
But only prayer to their specific Christian God, right? Or people, for instance, on certain apps that are walking around dragging a cross. Like, please tell me what is the point of that?
Who is that?
Like,
person?
There are like three. It's not one person.
There's three
There's
of
like
them?
three.
One person now.
I mean, on the hill
There's
called
at least
Golgotha.
More than one. Yeah.
They've
There
been
were
doing
three
it since before
crosses.
TikTok,
Right.
is what I've heard. Like, I know one person's been doing it for like 5 years, and they're just known in their town for the constant crosswalk.
For why?
Real talk, I want to
For
know
why?
how great their
I have
quads
questions.
are. I want to know.
They're
how
not
their
great.
quads.
I can see
They're
them on
not.
camera. They're not great, Andrew.
They're not great. Okay, well, I retract my
squat.
curiosity.
Not for that. Well, I mean, they kind of cheat because the one I'm
Because
thinking
their
of has
cross
wheels
has a
on the
wheel
cross.
attached to it.
And
It
so
has
it's just,
wheels?
It's not even like
Yeah.
a full-on repentance.
Yes, there's a wheel.
thing.
Yes.
Like, I need them to be bleeding. I
Yeah.
want whips. I need it to be like
Someone
Philippine
needs
style.
to follow them around and whip them while they're doing it.
Exactly.
If they really want to make it like for real. Yeah, whip them, throw stones at them.
Like I can't remember there's a festival in the Philippines where they do that every single year.
Oh, gosh.
In
Right,
terms of like a
yeah.
passion reenactment where each
Yeah.
person submits themselves to flagellants and a whole bunch of different things and crown.
I mean, you could just say that you have
know?
a degradation kink. That's okay.
So, no, there was someone at some point that there was someone that talked about like kinks from a perspective of theology that I thought was really interesting because it has to do with like power and how like power and taboo are interesting ideas that intersect with religion in fascinating ways.
Interesting.
And to shamelessly tie back to what you were saying a moment ago, like when we look at the evangelical church and the Republican Party, like I had a past. I used to work in the church. That's part of my story. Is I used to work in the church. I worked in a mega church for like 6.5 years, and one of the things that the last pastor I worked for said is that when religion gets in bed with the empire always wins and the religion always loses, because the religion loses its integrity and the empire gains the power of the religion.
That's amazing.
And that stuck with me as just a wow.
I mean, welcome to first century Rome.
Right. Like, and I'm not. I won't be the person on this on this YouTube channel, on this podcast. I won't be the person that is the Christian apologist by any stretch. But part of my story is going, look how much we fucked Christianity. Like, it could have been something so different than it is. And Empire found its new favorite tool to put in its utility belt and became the most, conquering Batman of all time, and decided to make Christianity its favorite toy.
Yeah.
And we're seeing that right now happen to Buddhism in China. Like this
I thought you meant here, and I was like, where?
no. So like there's
I was
this
like, really?
weird thing happening with Buddhism right now that we're like watching the empire do its best to overtake a religion.
Yeah.
And I know that some people don't call Buddhism religion. Fight me.
Interesting.
I'll call it religion. Whatever. It's empire loves its toys, and religion has been its favorite toy forever.
I love that comparison too, because I bring it up, I want to say often, but it's probably not as often as I think it is. But my favorite part of the Jehovah's Witness religion, obviously there's a lot of fault, and obviously there's a lot of control mechanics at play. But the one thing that they do right is they do not endorse a political party, and the entire reason why they don't allow their congregation to vote is not because it's something that's biblical or that there's any kind of theology behind it. It's the sole purpose that they don't want to be a part of the debate because it distracts from the church. And they said the worst thing that could happen is if they were to show up at somebody's door and knock on that door, and they're going to be turned around because they're saying, oh, no, Jehovah's Witnesses, you don't support gay marriage, or you don't do this, or you voted for Trump, get out of my house. And they are pushed away because their politics and not their religion. It's more detrimental to the church. They'd rather knock on that door, have someone say, I don't want to listen to you because you don't believe what I believe, than have someone turn them around because they voted the wrong way. I'm like, amazing. I love that.
Yeah. I mean, genuinely, the worst thing that could happen is them just showing up at my door. But I understand from their perspective. Like,
No, like, that's the exact same reason.
It's the social anxiety and the religious trauma.
Right. Like, if someone comes to my door, like, I've learned recently that adults wear clothes in their own houses. Is that a thing? Like, when did that start?
I guess.
I've read about it. I've heard people talk about it in a way like they describe themselves at home. Like, it's not like I go, hey, I'm at home, naked, obviously. That's not what I say.
Clothes.
But, like, I hear other people talk, and they talk about being clothed at home, and I'm
30 and I've never lived alone, so it would make my roommate perspectives very interesting if we were.
So that's fundamentally different. That's different.
Yeah.
I get that. I respect that.
I did have a nudist roommate though, and that was a fun year.
Wait. Pause the rest of the episode. Whatever our plans are have been destroyed. Can we talk about Jegaysus' nudist roommate for a hot second? Like,
sorry if y'all thought we were going to talk about religious literacy, because we're just going to talk about nudity.
Biblical literacy is just the trap, and then we get you in here to sexualize you. It's part of the gay agenda. Is it working?
This is your new religion. It is Jegaysus and the fantasy rom-com novels that some of y'all are going to write about the nudist roommate. You're welcome. Listen in carefully, and you better take notes, you heathens. All right, go ahead.
I mean,
we're
someone
had me on WordPress
or
Wattpad.
Someone commented on my post earlier and was like, "You said followers, and I thought you were a cult leader." And I was like, "You're not wrong. It wasn't what I meant, but you're not wrong." Like, my followers send me these signs.
And also, like, that's what we call them on TikTok.
Yeah. Actually, people
Maybe
ask
that's why
me
there's
all
so
the
many
time.
TikTok cults.
Oh.
I mean, who knows? Anyway, back to the nude roommate. This is a situation.
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, what do we want to know?
Oh, okay.
I was a roommate who's naked.
All the time.
I was naked. Our friends were naked. Everyone's naked. Not all the time.
Here's what I need to know. Did you get, like, an announcement from your roommate who has to wear clothes in public? Hey, just so you know, friend, I am a nudist. I'm a naturalist, and I want you to know that you will see my ass within the next 3 hours. Was that the conversation, or did you come
No, the conversation
they were
was
naked and very comfortable with it?
No, actually, no, there was a conversation. But the conversation in advance was I was looking for a place to live, and so he essentially, like, told me from email one. This is Craigslist, of course.
Of course.
But from email one, like, you know, I'm a nudist. You have to be cool with that.
It wasn't backdoor.
Be a nudist, but, like, you have to be cool with that. So he's like, if you want to come over see the place, I'm having a party tonight. It's going to be a nudist party. So that would test your waters to see if you're open to it, as well as show you the place and you can see the room.
It's going to show you the place already.
So I was like, yeah, of course.
I'm so glad that he referred to his body as the place. You can come over and see the place. You're welcome. This is my place. Do you like the upgrades I've done to it? It's been a lot of work.
No.
It's like,
as long as they have new
crib, this is the
curtains
place.
and everything.
Here's the front door. Here's the back door.
I can't.
Oh,
I have a whole life in these 30 years.
Oh my god. Okay. So, one more question, and then I swear we'll do the rest of this. Okay. So so I've been to parties that ended up being nudist parties that didn't start nudist parties.
No, they didn't
what
end up
is
being nudist
a
parties.
party?
They ended up being orgies. Like,
That happens, yeah.
That's another episode for a different day. Okay, but like, so I want to know, in a nudist party, are people meandering nude, or is it like erotic? Like, are they just like leaning up against the bar, just openly?
Well, I mean, this is still like an
nude?
apartment party, so you're still thinking like,
Oh, that's weird. Like
10 guys in a
needs to be
2-room
fixed.
apartment.
oh god.
So
But
it's
is
not
it
like
like nudity
a lot of
is
meandering.
secondary?
All dudes. I mean, we're gay. We're not.
Oh, so it's a gay nudist party.
It was a gay nudist party.
You
We kept it
actively...
specific.
You actively did not say that it was a male
Sorry.
gay nudist party.
So in that sense, whenever you put naked gay men together, I guess erotic, but like still very not. You know, like no one was really like hooking up, but it was still very like, hey.
Thought that like the nudity was for nudists was like a secondary thing, right? Like they thought it was normal to be nude, so it wasn't inherently erotic. Now I don't know about gay nudist parties because.
Well, that's the thing.
But...
When you put out, I don't know where necessarily he met all these people. Some of them are close friends, and some of them might have been new. But when you put out an ad saying, "Hey, show up to my apartment with 15 naked guys," you're gonna get a mixed crowd.
Oh.
Some people
I didn't
just
know it
totally
was an
naturalist.
ad.
And,
I
don't know if it was an
party,
ad. I have no idea.
Was this nudist party advertised? Because I feel like that would bring a whole different
know.
group of people.
I think it was on Grindr. Actually, I think what he used to do is like just post it as like his profile name on Grindr, like nudist party, and just whoever came. Whoever came.
Get it.
Okay,
And then I was there for
my
business.
whiteboard and take
I was
notes.
there as a business woman. Okay.
I'm a
I'm gonna erase my whiteboard
woman.
and I need to take notes on this so I understand what happened
No,
exactly.
I'm so sorry.
Okay.
I don't know what happened, but
There-
this is where we're at. This is what we're doing.
The layers.
I'm glad I took notes.
Yeah.
You are
Welcome to biblical
okay,
literacy.
If we ever want to know what Jegaysus is the lord of, it's burying the fucking lead.
I do that.
Because
That's
like
true.
it's just like because the story started off. I had a roommate who was a nudist. That's how this started. Let's review where we are. We are presently there was a nudist party advertised on Grindr where all the men were naked and gay, and you showed up. Wait.
To view the house?
Were
To
you
view the house.
nude when you showed up? Did they make you be nude?
Not when I showed up. After I got
Were you
there.
nude?
But
Yeah.
you were nude.
So you were.
You didn't drive over
course.
nude.
I'm not going to a nudist
could be a
party
trench
and
coat.
not taking off my clothes.
I guess it's the
trench
outfit for the evening. Like
Exactly.
Just like
It's like
oh,
when you
this
go
is
into
what
someone's
wear.
house and they say, "Can you please take off your shoes?" It's the same kind of thing.
Can you? God. Kind of.
3-piece suit of
Except your
church.
like your feet don't swing around.
Well,
You know, this reminds me of a biblical idiom where feet are
Does it? Oh,
feet and penis are very closely related in the Hebrew.
and so are the hands.
I'm going
Yeah.
to
Thrust his
uncover
hand
his
through
toes,
the
if you know
door.
what I mean.
We know exactly what you mean.
Yeah,
I-
I'm
None
gonna
of us
need you
should
to.
I
be
saw an
allowed-
interesting
maybe
TikTok actually about how
we shouldn't have
feet
done
are
this.
wired to the brain, and like in terms of where they are located in the nervous system, they're right up against the sexual organ nerves, and so that's why there's so much crossover between people who have
Interesting.
foot fetishes. And I commented on that, and I was like, my video about feet meaning penises is so much. It makes more sense. It really does. The Hebrew knew what was up. Like, you know, all the Jewish people were like, foot, that's a thing next to your penis gland in your brain.
Yeah. I guess
I would like
I
to.
have a question. Maybe Andrew, you would know this.
I know nothing anymore.
Sorry.
This is so amazing. Okay, go ahead.
I lost all of it. This is so much better than I anticipated.
It is better and
I
worse
guess
at the same time.
were the were the ancient Hebrew folks, in your opinion or your knowledge, more or less sexually liberated than we think they were?
Oh, substantially more sexually liberated than like the Puritans were in the colonial era, definitely.
Puritans, good lord.
Well, okay. Well, a caveat. One thing that we have to address every time we think about people groups is literacy, and literacy has more of an impact on cultural development than we give it credit for. Because now, think about everything you consume marketing wise. Everything has to do with the undertone that you are literate, enough to consume, enough to see, enough to watch. In a non-literate world, access to information, especially like sexual information, is limited. And that's the reason that we find Song of Songs and other literature similar as being listed as the Apocrypha, as being these secret documents that you could not consume until you were at a certain level of education. So, considering that was the upper echelon of like societal knowings, it would have probably been cherished as kind of a way of being like a higher class of citizen, which means that sexuality and erotic understanding would have been fashionable. And we see that also modeled within the medieval era, as where like women are talking about like their intellectual curiosity of sex and writing books about banging dudes for the intellectual curiosity, and that's like a really cool thing.
I kind of relate that, and I'm probably way out of my depths culturally, but I feel like we see something similar happening within like the Kama Sutra, and how it was like a classic passed down ancient knowledge to be earned and studied and meditated upon.
No, you're on the same track. I mean, sexual knowledge would have been viewed the same as any form of knowledge.
Yeah.
Mathematics and the orgasm would have been on the same playing field as understanding. It's just like physical knowledge, celestial knowledge.
I mean, to be honest, it like the female orgasm still feels like advanced calculus for men, so.
And it can't get research funding. I know that's
never
separate,
lied.
but literally you cannot finance grants to try to research the female orgasm.
It's like
Really?
theoretical mathematics at this point. You need like a PhD.
How many dudes named Chad are applying for that grant?
How many dudes named? We're doing a one-on-one study of a random 2,000 woman sample.
Sigma Chi.
I mean, no dudes named Chad are, because they all already think that it's like Dunning-Kruger of sex. Every guy named Chad thinks he's like the king.
You're probably not wrong.
Bye, Chad. I'm not wrong, no, yeah. Source, me, a woman, yeah.
She doesn't even have to outsource it. She can insource the information.
Anyway, sorry.
Right here. Okay, so whoever's out there, we paused for this commercial break. Whoever out there is interested in doing like a pie graph of how much of this episode was about sex, please get back to us, because we would love to know.
All of it.
Yeah.
Even when we
tried,
say biblical
but...
literacy, people are like, oh, they're using that as some kind of innuendo.
Innuendo.
They were like, oh, then she knew him.
I did start this with hello, heathens.
As a man.
Remember this. I warned everyone. That was your trigger warning.
That's true.
And
trigger warning.
The suggestion of being morally inappropriate tied to sexuality is a puritanical device.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And Paul.
No, absolutely. I
Paul.
actually Paul. Yeah, it's Paul's fault. He was certainly, at the very least, Paul was asexual in my not so humble opinion.
I'm in the Paul was gay camp.
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay. So
Go ahead, Andrew.
I'm going to suggest that okay. So for the rest of you that are listening to this episode, before we did this, we had a plan. This wasn't part of it. We didn't know Jegaysus had a nudist roommate.
It throws everything out the window every time.
You're gonna have a lot of trouble following up this episode with amazing stories unless there's like this treasure trove that you haven't exposed us to. I am so ready for it.
I have a long life.
I mean, I feel like we probably all have some stories.
Oh yeah, one day I'll tell you all about the naked man.
I mean, one of my
aquarium.
birthday parties was a no pants party.
Are they all going to be no pants related? Because it's sounding like it.
We just had two overlapping ideas.
I said naked, she said no pants. Here we are.
Oh, well, it's interesting to discuss this idea of like feeling like sexuality in any capacity is
Mhm.
taboo and how that's very deeply rooted in Puritanism, but also like how much that has affected this sort of generation of evangelicals because of purity culture, and how you're taught that like so much about sex basically, or your natural based sort of desires, instincts, attractions, whatever, is shameful and bad, and to be repressed or pushed down or ignored or saved, and how like all of your worth is tied up in this one interaction. Um, yeah, so that was just sort of my thought on that, was like we're talking about sexuality, and I think that today we have a much more sort of repressed understanding or belief, and like even 10 years out of religion and out of purity culture, like I still have these conversations and I'm like, oh no, we're talking about something
Mm.
bad, like I should be talking about this, and they're like, no, it's a totally natural thing, and like it shouldn't be weird for people to talk about or hear or whatever, but so many people still are. That was sort of just
Y-
my
I
thought.
just realized how diverse our like sexual understanding and awakening and understanding is amongst the three of us. Like, I think it'd be so cool if we talked about an episode about
Yeah.
just human sexuality. I just
Yes, I was gonna be a human sexuality major. That's my. Let's
I
jump
want
in.
yes. Yes. So my seminary actually did a human sexuality course and brought in professors for the program, like, and then did theology around that, and
I
it
love
was
it.
one of the most healing things I've ever been a part of. It was incredible.
I
Um,
love it.
Yeah.
so yeah, so I think it'd be really cool if we just had that conversation, because you're right, like, and I think about it from the lens of like religion and empire. Like, what was the tool of communication for the empire to impose a certain kind of control of people? Well, it was obviously religion. I mean, religion was the easiest one because religion was the one that addressed the goings on of daily life outside of production of money and media. And so it was the easiest tool
And you
at
think
the
they use
disposal.
sexuality within that in terms of the empire controlling?
I I think that it was really easy to take Christianity and go, you're now about not banging. That's your thing.
Yeah.
Because, Paul presented this polemic in Corinthians. I forget which Corinthian letter it was, but he said, I'd prefer that all y'all be single, which
First
is
Corinthians
so
7:1.
boom. That's why
I
you
use
always have
that a
Jesus on the
lot.
podcast.
Oh, boom
Well,
bow.
it's so like, okay, so in First Corinthians, Paul is presenting a polemic away from the Jewish notion of be fruitful and multiply, but it's
Right.
also a very but it became used as this, like, it's better to not have sex at all if you don't have to, like that's
And that's a
how,
translation thing too, because depending on which one which version of the verse you look at, you'll have one version that says it's better to not marry a woman, and then other versions say it's better not to sleep with a woman, and that's why you should only have sex with your wife. But if
is
we're
the
looking
Greek there
at the
like to know?
version, I haven't looked at the Greek, but I just know it's been translated half and half depending on which books you're looking at. And I feel like the reason why they translate it's better not to like have sex or sleep with a woman is because they wanted to ensure that purity culture continued. Whereas it feels almost like the original would have said it's better to not marry a woman, which changes their whole context. Because if they're saying wait till marriage, they can't really use that when Paul's saying don't get married at all. In terms of like I think what Paul is trying to do is the same thing that we see in a lot of different religions in terms of setting their own doctrine apart, where Paul was saying it's better not to marry or it's better not to sleep with somebody. He may have actually more been reacting to the pagan rituals around him, right? Which were quote unquote highly sexualized, and they had fertility gods and goddesses. And I feel like he was trying to set the Christians apart for while all these pagan people were having orgies and doing it as a sacrifice and doing it to worship their gods. He was saying, how about y'all just don't have sex at all?
No, that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, I think there's also an interesting, for me, and I'm just sort of riffing here because I don't actually have the background information on it. But like Paul was very much of the belief that
Right.
Jesus was coming back in his lifetime, like ASAP. So part of me is curious about how that played into his views on either marriage or sex, to be honest. But especially marriage, because if I'm remembering correctly, and I'd have to look up the chapter and verse, but the understanding that like when you got to heaven, basically you wouldn't have a wife or you wouldn't have whatever because sorry, Andrew, you might know this. What is that one? Is it the parable? Basically where the husband dies, she marries the brother, and then who will be my husband when I get to heaven? And basically they say like the parable says that you don't have that a husband in heaven. Isn't that right?
Right. Like, so what's really fascinating is that whenever we hear heaven and marriage talk together, it's how there is no marriage in heaven. Like, the only marriage analogy that is
Right.
given is this, like, marriage between the bridegroom and
Right.
the church. Now,
Right.
that's not used in that passage, but whenever that analogy is used of what marriage is, it's usually used in reference to, like, this different way of being in a relationship that is affiliated with Jesus. And so, I
Yeah.
often struggle with that language pattern, going, wait a minute, are they trying to and I know they're not thinking about human sexuality because that's not a thing, that's not an idea yet, really, but they
Yeah.
are presenting kind of an asexual version of humanity. Well, maybe not even asexual, but like maybe they're thinking about it in like a dowry structure where there is no power dynamics anymore,
Right.
of like or any need to produce more people. I don't. I haven't done enough research to have an idea. I just have like a
Fair enough.
curiosity
Yeah.
or a concern attached to it
Well,
because
because
it's such a
marriage used to
strange,
be ownership, right? So were they just
right?
trying to express a sort of freedom to not have to enter into any kind of contracts in terms of marital bliss?
Oh, I like that idea. That well, because like we underestimate the dowry structure that is so common. Like you cannot divorce, pun intended, but you can't divorce the biblical marriage like either from the Hebrew scriptures or the Christian scriptures from a dowry structure where women
Right.
are these beings of no power owned by the
Yeah.
husband and then owned by the father and then by the husband. Like you can't separate those ideas. And so now what do these texts do to the believing person, Jewish or Christian, that is no
Yeah.
longer in a dowry structure? Like, how do these apply in a meaningful way, or do they at all?
Sounds
Well,
like a
it's again
deep dive.
understanding the context and the people and all of that that it was written within and to. I mean, we, at least in the West, don't really use the dowry structure anymore, and so it's a lot of the understanding and I think cultural implications are lost on us when we read that. We think of marriage as we know it,
Hmm.
which is a relationship or a legal contract that's entered into by two people who agree and who want to do it and who aren't being told this is what you're doing. Um, and so I think a lot of that nuance is lost. And so again, why literacy is important in this context is like understanding what all of that actually meant in a much deeper way and in a much different way than we understand it today
Yeah.
because it's very different. I mean, marriage in the ancient world is it would be unrecognizable, I think, in many ways to us today.
Yeah, I very much stand in this space, and I think this is good for like initiating evocative conversation as well. But like, there is nothing biblical about modern day marriage. I mean, people, whoever is on top can be on top. There is no ownership. There is no like specific role of gender associated with home ownership or home managing. Like there's no specific role of sex in direct proportion to procreation anymore. There is nothing biblical about modern day marriage, straight, gay, or otherwise.
Yeah.
And so perhaps we should maybe grow up a little bit and think about it a little bit differently.
And I feel like it's always
Grow up,
been
ho.
more of a governmental structure than a religious one. And even in the biblical times, it would have been more of recognized through, I guess, the bureaucracy, if we can call it that. more than it was in terms of like religious sacrament or any kind of procedure. It was much more like, this is what you do. This is how you show your ownership.
Yeah.
This is how you show
It
your
wasn't like
wealth
you got
level.
married because you think God. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. It was very much a social construct, much more than a religious construct, as it still is, I think.
Well, even then, like, I I would
Anyway,
say that that had directly to do with what they thought about God. Like their governmental structure preceded their theological understanding.
Mm.
This is the way our world functions, and here's our theology because of that. We do that today. This
Yeah.
is how our world functions, and here's our theology because of that. I mean, there's a reason that colonialism preceded Manifest Destiny by what 150 years. Like the world
yeah.
structure and the imperial structures because of that preceded the theology,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm of the opinion that's the way the world continuously functions, regardless of the religion,
It makes
regardless
sense.
of the nation.
It's why we
Yeah.
bend things to fit where our common narrative is, or where our, I guess, the majority lies. Bending
Yeah.
the scripture now even to fit it.
I mean, for the
I
most
agree.
part, theology is reactionary. If it wasn't
Mm-hmm.
reactionary, then it wouldn't have changed. Like, we would have the same exact understanding of everything as they
Right.
did at the time it was written, and I think we can pretty much all agree that we don't have that same understanding. And so, yeah, theology is reactionary.
That's the reason I have
I
like literally
I
nothing.
don't mind just recording a YouTube episode
This episode is sponsored by men that are better lookings of Mr. Clean,
by
who
my
also
dog.
deliver dog food. I meant
Anyway,
everything I said.
sorry. Yes, theology is reactionary. Yeah, and that's because, God, humans inherently, whether they want to admit it or not, um, are going to their understanding adapts. That's it. Whether or not you want it to, your understanding of things adapts to your experiences, and
Of
that's
course.
it's yeah, and that's natural. And so it's going to be very difficult to have the same understanding of something that someone thousands of years ago did, or 1,000 years ago, or whatever. Um, yeah. Anyway, I lost my train of thought because of the dog food bag.
You're stumbling upon my pet peeve right there. This is why I don't ever want to be considered a theologian
Mm.
ever. Like, because theology is constantly the making of things out of the pieces of former things we don't understand.
Yep.
I don't want to be a theologian. I want to be a literary critical scholar. And scholar should be in quotes because I'll probably never have my PhD in this stuff. But, like, I I cannot stand systematic theology because it is constantly, it feels like the conspiracy theory of God to me,
Yeah.
where it's just constantly like let's bastardize 8 different writing genres across 3,000 years
Mm.
to make you feel special. I
Yeah.
have no thank you.
Yeah.
That's not
Well,
my
and it's like
bag at any point in time.
they they do this, and then it's they're dead set on being right. They're correct. This is what it means. The end. Until it changes, and then all of a sudden, this new school of theologians is exactly right and 100%, and no one can tell them otherwise. And then the newer school of theologians, and it's just like it would be so much more beneficial to both religion and the world at large if we could just have these conversations without having to insist that our understanding is the absolute correct understanding. Like just being able to talk about
That's
things
a
and be
problem
like,
with
this is what I think.
inerrancy. That's what that is.
Right. Yeah.
Say more
Totally.
about
But
that.
like,
What do you mean?
Who, me?
Yeah.
Oh, hi.
Well,
I
so I know that Mother of Dogs and myself are chatty Cathy's by
Oh, you're good.
nature, and
yes.
I want to balance this a little bit. So
Okay.
like,
Well, so in terms of inerrancy, I feel like that will just, coming off of what you were just saying about how people need this, they have an obsessive need almost to be right and to change the theological perspective on whatever they consider to be morally right at the time. And as it is human nature for people to want to read things out of context to fit into their biased views to try to confirm, whatever they come into that with. People will always bring their morality to religion. And like if you look at people who want others to suffer, who want them to burn in hell, they're going to have a very strict way of looking at hell doctrine and how other people are going to be treated by God in the afterlife, because that's who they were. That was their personality, and they found something that supports that. While you see someone take the same exact book and they're very loving and they have a totally different outlook of the exact same passage because they think everyone deserves love and deserves respect, and that's their personality. So you're going to see people always bend the theology to their will, but we get a problem with that when it becomes a black and white situation that you can't mold or change, and believing that it's inerrant puts so much more passion behind that, because if anyone else challenges you and says, I see it a different way, and doing my research, I think this is what it was saying culturally. If you take that away from a person who believes it was the exact words of God, you're going against God. You're going against the biggest thing in their life, and they will fight that, especially when it already ties to their personality of what they want to be true.
I really feel like the inerrancy doctrine was the loading of a gun by evangelicals that they inadvertently pointed at their own selves. Like, they have created this like monster they cannot contain, and they have impassioned so many people that grew up evangelical, like myself, who I still have all the passions of an evangelical with the tenacity to watch the structure dissolve.
Sure.
And I don't think they were prepared for us to keep the training and change teams.
No.
They're in trouble.
I think what it is, too, is they weren't seeing social media coming. Before, you would have had to been like Christopher Hitchens or Richard
That's
Dawkins,
fair.
somebody who has like a vendetta to be like the top atheist in the world, to come after religion. They didn't expect people to group up on our own and have these conversations without a leader, without someone directing the conversation. Not that they could have, but that's kind of where they shot themselves in the foot, because now you have pastors and theologians and then atheists and just soccer moms and a whole bunch of different people adding their viewpoints and building something different.
That is a shameless plug.
That if I had grown up in a church that was willing to discuss these things, and it wasn't like when I said, well, the Bible here and the Bible here doesn't quite match up, and their basic response was like, either some sort of like Olympic level mental gymnastics, or you just have to have faith and, God's ways are higher than our ways. If they had been willing to have these conversations about like, the Bible isn't inerrant, and like this is what they were thinking at this time, and this is what they were thinking at this time, and this is how things have changed, like I might not be as vehement as I am now, and like depending on how progressive the church had been, like I might not have felt the need to leave entirely, right? Like it might have just been like yeah, okay, like I'm just learning about religion, and this is a community, and whatever. I mean, I don't know that I would have stayed, but I certainly would not have felt the need to like hard exit and then do all of this research and then tell other people, which is what you're saying, which is like this training that they gave us, and then we switched teams, and now we're just tenaciously, vehemently sort of, I don't even want to say anti, but just like, I guess anti-inerrancy, where it's like, here.
We're for.
Would you say that you're on fire, Jessica?
Yeah, I am on fire for the truth. Which, as it turns out,
for
is not
Jegaysus.
Necessarily for Jegaysus only.
Do you have the fire of Jegaysus Christ?
I am
Acquire the fire.
for Jegaysus.
I am flaming for Jegaysus. I'm dead. Goodbye. Deceased. Whew. Okay, yeah.
Okay.
Raging for Jegaysus.
Get to your shameless plug.
Okay, so it is no longer a plug because it no longer connects. I'm just gonna. So we talked about talking about the things that we're exploring next that they can see new content about from us. One thing that you can expect from our episodes moving forward, lovely friends, heathens, and Jegaysus stands, is that we will we will talk about the things that we're exploring throughout the episodes. They may take up more of the episode than this or less, but we will talk about the things that we are exploring. So one of the things that I am exploring that I will talk about more on TikTok specifically, and perhaps on YouTube as well, is magic. Specifically magic in association with the Hebrew scriptures, the Christian scriptures, and how that intersects with disrupting the status quo of power. Because magic and power seems to have a really interesting relationship, and so do the prophets and power, and so magic, prophets, power. I'm going to be interacting with those ideas a lot in the next few episodes.
And something like I would never have thought really crossed over. I mean, obviously, I know there's some crossover between the subject of, magic in the Bible, but actually using that within prophecy and using that intertwined is going to be interesting.
Yeah.
Well, and honestly, I didn't think it would either. Like, I just stumbled into it. Like when I went to seminary as well. That's a thing. Story, friends, is that I went to seminary, and one of the classes I took interacted with the Mithraic cults in the first century, which is Mithra was like. Mithra's a deity, and there is this religion that was very magic-oriented associated with Mithra, and so the undertone of magic in the first century was huge, and that was this kind of like theological gateway drug for me to go, oh my gosh, they believed in magic. How does that impact how we read this?
Right.
They believed in spirits and magic and possession, and not just like evil, but like good possession, and shamans and ecstatic experiences. So how does that interact? And the more I read magic books outside of the Bible, I learned that magic was a way for people with no power to interact with spiritual forces that could give them power. And so it's almost like a spiritual rebellion against the way the natural orders of the world are working, where you could like curse lords if you were a serf. And so that, branded with like the liberation theology that I'm familiar with, makes me go, oh man, I need to know more about what the early Jews, like the pre-exilic, post-exilic Jews, and the first century Christians, Jewish and Gentile, thought about magic as a source of power for God or against God. I need to know. And so that's what I'm diving into.
Love it.
Oh, that's fascinating. Yeah.
So that's my thing. Also, Red Sage, check me out on Twitter, Instagram. You can also check me out on TikTok. This is it. I'll also have an individual YouTube channel where I'll post TikTok stuff and other things, and I'll talk to these lovely humans as well. That's all the things I'll say for the rest of the episode. What about you, Mother of Dogs? What do you have?
I'll keep it short and sweet. So I am Mother of Dogs on TikTok with all the O's being zeros. I am Queen of Heathens on Twitter and Instagram with the O being a zero. Find me there. I don't know what I'll be talking about. I'll probably be reading more church signs and criticizing terrible Christian art. You're welcome. Jegaysus.
I love it. So my name is Jegaysus on all the platforms, I guess. TikTok, Instagram. I don't use Twitter, but I'm on it. So if you ever want to see me complain about losing a headphone or something, I'll put that on Twitter because I don't know what else to do with it. And that's Jegaysus, spelled, like Jegaysus. I don't know what my next topics are. I guess I really have been looking at the classic Renaissance arts by accident, like Michelangelo, which led us to Harry Mary, and that's going to do Homunculus Jesus next. So stay tuned for that.
Yeah.
And
all right.
it's
Well,
been nice hanging out
it's
with y'all.
It's been real. It's been fun. It's been really fun. Love
So,
y'all.
See everyone next time.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.